Everyone. So I get the opportunity to get you all warmed up for the speakers. I was talking with these young ladies behind me here. They said, don't mess up. So as Frank talked about, there is a lot of opportunity and risk happening right now in the educational arena, worldwide. I want to show a few statistics at you very quickly. So in 2010, a rough order of magnitude, 70,000 students graduated in the United States with a STEM degree, science, technology, engineering, and math. Compare that to 90,000 psychology majors. So when we think about the risk that all of us are facing, we think about the world of technology going on. I hope you all have ordered a new iPhone through AT&T. The idea being is that technology is going to consistently change what's happening within the field of education. To Frank's point, there's not one time I don't pick up some article in the Wall Street Journal or something in Dallas Morning News where somebody's complained that they are $300,000 in debt, they can't buy a house because that's their mortgage payment, or there's something going on in high school. Recently, the students sued the California Teachers Association for tenure. There is huge changes happening not only today, but also on the horizon. So what's causing all this change? What's fueling all of this? Is this activist parents? Is it just the pure cost? Is it the fact that colleges haven't listened? I think there's a whole number of categories that we could attribute this to. But what's now starting to fill that vacuum up if people cannot afford to go to college or they feel that they're not getting educated properly in high school? Well, first off, let's talk about Moocs, massive open online courses. That started with Sebastian Thrun a couple of years ago. There's other organizations such as Coursera. But the opportunity that's in front of us right now for them is to provide content in a way that's free and open access to anybody worldwide. I've had the opportunity to sit with Sebastian numerous times, and he always tells me this story about a 14-year-old girl in India who is taking advanced calculus. Never would have an opportunity to take that. She is an absolute genius. She is now coaching, and they are helping her develop content. Where would you have thought of that years ago, where somebody would have not only the opportunity, but the opportunity to also educate others? So as these open courses, and I don't know what a Moocs will survive, but the thing we need to focus on is the opportunity from a worldwide campus, and looking at the world as an open opportunity for people to learn and engage. Secondly, I like to call this Supercharged Online. There's a lot of universities that are represented today that have really set the course from online education. Colleges have kind of started to wake up to the idea that brick and mortar is not going to work. So if you can't afford the college experience, where is your alternatives to go and take and learn? So I believe that online, and I call it supercharged because I do believe as other educational institutions decide that this is an opportunity. I'm going to step down here. I hope you all can see me because I'm going to trip over this plastic. As an opportunity to expand out. Now what that does internally, what is your strategy in terms of embracing online within your learning organizations? What is your opportunity to direct people through your tuition program to engage online in a much more inexpensive format? I'm not here to plug AT&T, but I am very proud of something we inaugurated last year. You can get a master's degree in computer science from Georgia Tech for $6,500, all online. We worked with Georgia Tech, we worked with Sebastian, and we set that up. Now, is that a disruptor in the marketplace? Perhaps. Not a lot of students taking it, perhaps. But think about the opportunity cost that you have where you can provide that type of educational advancement at such a very low cost. And what does that do to the contributing to the educational development? Is there greater opportunities for partnerships like that between corporate, business, and educational systems? Now, I'll give you a little bit of insight. It was a challenge getting Georgia Tech to kind of do this because it's not really in their model. It's not something that they kind of come to, and they are having a lot of debate, as I've read about this, is they understand online and technology is going to disrupt them, but they're also trying to say, we've got this beautiful campus in downtown Atlanta. What are we going to do with all this? What are we going to do with our tenured professors who aren't prepared to teach online? Because it's a very different experience. Having watched what goes through these educators and instructors with Moocs, it is very challenging to be able to conduct that type of learning program. Now, if you start thinking about where these platforms end up taking us, and you end up looking at the advancement that technology is going to have, what then produces the next disruptor? I don't have my BlackBerry here. But think about this device in your hand. How many of you have a cell phone? Anybody not carry a cell phone with them, or a tablet or a laptop? How much power is in your hands to be able to educate yourself, educate your workforce, educate your leadership, and educate prospective employees coming into your organization? The power of technology is going to enable us to create the idea of open access to any information. Now think about that when you start developing your learning and your content. I would ask you to think for a second, for those of you that are in human resources. How many of you, when a new employee comes in, you still hand them a binder and say, welcome to XYZ company, we're a technology company. Oh, by the way, here's your binder, and you got to fill out these forms and send it in. Now think about that. The ability to be able to use this to constantly educate and reskill and upskill, and that's really what this all is after. How do we reskill and upskill our current workforce so that we are able to continue to grow those employees, and those employees see it as an opportunity, as opposed to saying, your skills have maxed out, you haven't kept up, we now have to bring other people in. Now, the ability for us to be able to do that is going to be incumbent upon certain investments from a technology perspective, but it's also going to be incumbent upon a will and desire to do so. Is your company an organization that's going to stand out and say that we're going to educate our current workforce, or are we focused on the external? Ladies and gentlemen, the successful companies are going to have a strategy that has duality to it. The ability for able to take workers that skills have matured as technology has changed, as the thrust of your business objectives changes. Instead of going externally, are you investing in upskilling them? Are you investing in reskilling them? And it's not necessarily we have to create this large learning organization. There are millions and millions of courses that are open access, millions of courses online that will be able to give you the ability to be able to use that technology, use that content for the betterment of your organizations. Unfortunately, that's not a place that normally a lot of investment is made. And the challenges that we face within the development of this content is the investment that's being made can either be done through online, through Moocs, through other disruptors, as opposed to traditional, give them a tuition plan, let them go out, let them enroll, and don't measure the investment that you've gotten from that individual. I would probably have you reflect for a second. If those of you that have tuition assistance programs, how many of you measure the success of those people who take the tuition plan? How many of you measure their skill development? How many of you measure their promotional opportunities? How many of you measure them if they get advanced within their organization? How many of they stay around for 5 years? Are you getting that investment back? And I would probably tell you, generally speaking, ladies and gentlemen, they're probably not measuring that investment. But you should be, because if you took those $52.50 or whatever dollars that you're investing into that and redirected that to perhaps more online, more education that is going to have a more favorable return back to you, you're probably going to get a better opportunity to measure the impact. So when the CFO says, how much did I return back on this investment that you made? You're going to be in a much better opportunity to be able to give that information back and measure the impact. Now, I talked earlier about the World Campus. And this is kind of an interesting phenomenon as we've started looking at worldwide global enterprise, all of world. I have a very, very good friend of mine, runs a small boutique learning organization out in Seattle. He is a Yale graduate. Now, if you have anybody who has ever gone to Yale, they would tell you that when you get on campus, you're laughing. You know people that went to Yale? Okay. The Yale experience, you have to be in New Haven. And I've been to New Haven. I'm not sure what the experience is, but you have to go through the Yale experience. That's been the whole mantra of the culture within that college. What they now have done, they opened up a campus last year in China. Why? There is an opportunity there in China from a global, worldwide perspective. What's also driving them, and I don't think this is necessarily what they'd want to bring out, it is certainly a revenue opportunity. Because the viewpoint being is we're not going to have enough people going over to New Haven. We want to expand out. So colleges themselves are scrambling with the notion of how do we take that college campus, how do we take that Yale experience and make it worldwide. That is going to continue to be a trend as colleges continue to look for opportunities that somehow replicate the college experience, especially if you happen to be a Yale graduate. Now, the implication of worldwide is having an impact from a regulatory perspective. Again, not an opportunity goes past where there's not some discussion about immigration reform, HB1 visas, the ability to bring in folks from other parts of the world to continue to be educated here. We'd like to comfort ourselves at times that we have a number of folks from China and India that come in. There is approximately 1 million Chinese right now within the educational system of the United States. Are they staying? 20 years ago they did. Where's the opportunity now? It's back in China. So while we're educating, we're not getting any return back from that. Part of that is because of the way the HB1 visas are set up. But that is impacting our ability to retain and continue to engage talent within the organization. So if you're a workforce planner within your company, how do you forecast out in 5, 10, 15 years the type of workforce that you're going to need? Are you going to need people who have very limited education? People that are not educated in STEM or the emerging skills areas? If we don't have some sort of flexibility within the legislative branch, we're going to end up continually to be behind. I want you to remember the word "to." If anything you come out of this discussion with me today. 2 is a very, very important number in workforce planning. And the reason we say 2 is that for the United States to continue to have, or any country to have enough workforce, you have to replicate the parents. So if you don't have 2.1 kids in that next generation, if you slip to 1.8, guess what happens? You're not going to have enough workers to be able to sustain yourselves. There's discussions right now in a forecast model that 100 years from now, the people who are of Greek origin will disappear because they're at 0.08 children from the next generation. So when you think about your workforce planning, you need to start looking at where those numbers are and where the generation's going. China is in the same boat. Japan is in the same boat. You've got an aging workforce and you're not replicating enough workers to come back out. So as you start looking and you hear those numbers, think about the implications that you're going to end up having from a workforce perspective if you don't have enough population to be able to sustain that next generation. And there's significant implications beyond that. We talk about Social Security and the drain the baby boomers are putting on educational systems, Social Security systems, the medical systems. If this trend continues, and the forecast over 50 years, the United States without immigration reform will be down to about 1.7. There will be a continuing focus and battle to be able to sustain and bring in additional talent into your organizations. Lastly, when you think about the ideas of technology and the influence that it has, technology is by itself not going to change the methodologies that we use from a planning and from a learning perspective. What it is going to enable you to do is to be able to customize your learning, have 24/7 complete access. We often talk about within AT&T the idea that customize your rate plan, customize your media. If you're like me, everybody's paying for 400 channels, you probably watch about 10 or 15, right? Okay. The same thing is applying when you start looking at your course catalogs from a learning perspective. How many of you have courses out there that nobody uses? I had, prior to this current role I'm in, I headed up learning services worldwide for AT&T. One of my first things I did when I went into the job, I asked for our course catalog. Now we're a big company, I get it. We have 265,000 employees around the world. We had 27,000 different courses, okay? But as you start digging, it's like, well, that's an impressive number. Well, you start digging into the data. We had 254 project management courses. So if you're a user of this, which project management course do you have? We had courses out there that were 20 years old. I think project management's kind of moved over the years. I don't know why. So we started going back, and I coined it drain the swamp, because it really was. We had a lot of swamp water out there. So when you think about the idea of what you're doing from an internal perspective, as well as your direction for online, make sure that those courses are relevant to what you want people to do. Don't be in a situation where people are just taking courses for the sake of courses and for the sake of development. More direction needs to be utilized to enable people to help themselves with their own development. We need to be able to provide some level of guidance, but you can't be at a point where your course catalog is so significantly overblown that you yourself don't have a clue what's actually in that content and how people are using and applying it. So, ladies and gentlemen, in closing, people talk about this, the education and what's happening in the industry as evolutionary. I've heard people coin it as revolutionary. I would prefer you walk away with this with the idea that is expeditionary. There is going to continue to be a lot of change. Your role from workforce planning as being HR leaders and professionals should be exploring what those options are that are out there. There will continue to be more options, more opportunity, more places where you can continue to invest your dollars to ensure that you've got a stable workforce, not only internal to the organization, but also external. It's very easy for us, especially when we look at the field of planning and workforce development, to be able to have some level of continuity. Leaders like it, our managers like it. But the idea being is that the exploration, our responsibility should be to the employees who look upon us to ensure that we are helping them in their path of development, as well as recruiting external talent in. Are you a company that's considered to be far-reaching in terms of your development, far-reaching in terms of how you recruit, far-reaching in terms of attraction? Or are you a company that is considered kind of just in the mix? Look for those opportunities that allow you to stand out, allow you to be somebody that is considered to be prime in your industry, and somebody that if you go onto a college campus has an impact and you've got a good story to tell. Thank you.